Hello viewers, we are joined by acting Kenya's ambassador to the US, Jean Kamau. Balozi, I know this is your first time to sit down with the Kenyan media house since you took office in Washington. Karibu sana. Now, first things first, what brings you to Atlanta?
I've been here the last one day joining Kenyans who invited the Kenyan Mission to join them in celebration of Mashujaa Day in October 2013, and also to celebrate Kenya at 50, because these are very important national celebrations which the diaspora community will join their fellow Kenyans in celebrating.
I must say from the outset that we have seen a marked improvement in the way the embassy in Washington is run, at least in the recent past. But there are still some areas that do need some streamlining. We in the media receive sporadic, or if you like, intermittent reports of poor service delivery in your office. What is your take on this?
Well, first of all, just to reiterate that we welcome complaints because it is the right of every Kenyan to have quality services. And under our new constitution, the right to information and the right to quality services is enshrined. And all Kenyans, by all means, should demand and insist on quality service delivery. Now, we at the embassy are guided in our service delivery by a service charter which we adopted in 2009, which clearly spells out the standards at which we must, be rated on the delivery of our service. If we fall short of that standard, then of course we expect to be informed and for Kenyans to feel free to inform us that they are not satisfied with our services. If we do get a complaint, we always act on it to the best of our ability, because the level of our services touches on the right to movement, passports, visas, identity documents, verification of documents. So those are very sensitive issues which everybody wants addressed timely and efficiently. Now, we recently improved our service delivery by putting on our website a complaints address where members of the public can write directly to us and inform us about how they feel about our services, and to also share with us specific complaints they have about our service delivery. And we will respond, because that's really our mandate and our duty to do that.
As you are aware, the US government recently issued a travel advisory asking its citizens to be very careful if they visit Kenya. In fact, the advisory was almost asking them not to visit following the Westgate attack. What is the embassy's position on this? And also, have the numbers of visa applications dropped because of this?
Well, first of all, just to again join those who have said before that it's very unfortunate that the travel advisories are issued, because really the challenges that Kenya is facing on the security side, global terrorism is it's an international issue. Yes. And that we are targets just like any other country, and that our effort to counter terrorist attacks is not, it's something we work in collaboration even with the US government. Yes. So, the right to issue the travel advisory, by all means, rests to that with the government, but would really appreciate that these travel advisories were not issued, because they have an effect on our tourism. Now, in terms of the numbers at the embassy, we've not seen a significant reduction in numbers. What we have seen is a lot of queries. Travelers are concerned. They want assurances that that the government has put in measures to protect them, and we do provide those assurances. The government has provided us with information that we can share with any prospective tourists and visitors to the country. And so far, we've not seen anything adverse, and we are providing necessary assurances and information to travelers who are still seeking to travel to Kenya.
Are you telling the Americans to continue visiting Kenya regardless of the advisories from their own government?
We are encouraging Americans to visit Kenya. And
regardless of what?
And the terrorist attack that recently happened in Westgate could happen in any other country that they were to visit. And we are encouraging them to visit Kenya on an assurance that the government has put in measures to ensure that there's adequate security for our visitors and also for our own people.
Now, as a diplomat, is your office in a position to talk to the State Department directly and say, hey, don't be too harsh on us, don't judge the situation in Nairobi too harshly.
Absolutely. We have close working relationships with our colleagues in the State Department. We have ongoing bilateral consultations on all issues that are of interest to us as a country and for them. So we voice our concern about the travel advisory, and that has happened not just here but also in Kenya, through our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and in fact even up to the level of the Office of the President. So that dialogue is continuing at all levels, where we've expressed our concerns, and we continue to work with the American government on different aspects of improving our security, so that they are also informed of the efforts that we are making, because we work in collaboration, especially on the issue around terrorism and national security, where we have common interests, touching on global terrorism, which is an issue that both our countries face and are at risk of because of the nature of the terrorist attacks.
Balozi, I'm sure you know this because you work in the embassy. For the first time in about 3 years, the remittances by the Kenyans here in the diaspora, not just in the US, but generally speaking, and US is part of the larger diaspora, and it means it makes a big difference when the US is mentioned in these remittances. Now the remittances have gone down. Do you know why?
Again, this is information that came to our notice through different channels, and some of the explanations that have been put forward is perhaps the economic situation here. In the US, maybe some of our Kenyans have been affected. Perhaps for some, the extent, the 2-week shutdown could have, may have a slight bearing on that. But for whatever reason, I'm sure maybe it could just be a temporary, lapse in the numbers. But in terms of the remittances, if they do go up, I think it's still a steady source of income that the government relies on for its forex reserves.
So it is not political?
I don't think so. I mean, these are just probably just economic downturns, and they could come. There could be an upturn with time. But we'll wait for the experts to maybe do some deeper analysis and provide us with more exact details on why this is happening.
We in the media have recently been covering stories, very horrifying stories, actually worrying stories of an increase in the number of Kenyans who are dying of causes which are not accidents or sickness. What does the embassy want the Kenyans to know about this issue, which is of course of great concern? We
do receive regular reports of Kenyans who die in the US for different reasons, terminally ill, accidents, but of course the ones which concern the community is those deaths resulting from violence, whether it's be murder, homicide, family violence, domestic violence related cases, and those, within the community there's concern that there's been an upsurge, especially around domestic violence cases and murders, young men who have been involved, in the entertainment industry, to put it that way. Now, the authorities here, of course, are very competent in terms of investigating these incidences, but the ones which we've seen a huge interest, as it were, within the diaspora community is deaths resulting from domestic violence, because this is something new that the community is coming to grips with. Why is domestic violence an issue, and especially when it results in death of children and spouses, and the growth of that problem is one of the issues that the diaspora community has said they want discussed at this year's annual diaspora conference. They want more discussion and deliberation around issues affecting the diaspora community, because they need to, people want to understand why this is now becoming a problem. But just to mention that in cases where Kenyans have died through violent, they've met their death in a violent situation, we get information through the law enforcement agencies on their efforts, and also working with the families of the affected Kenyans. Okay, let's now talk diplomacy. I know you alluded to this in an earlier answer, but perhaps you can expound on it. The writing, Balozi, is clearly on the wall. The diplomatic relations between Kenya and the US cannot really be said to be at its best right now. Does it worry you as a representative of the East African nation in Washington? Yeah, I think in terms of Kenya's bilateral relationships with the US, there is absolutely no indication whatsoever that it's affected. And I think this is a bilateral relationship that's been there for many years, developed over different administrations. Within our 4 presidencies that we've had in Kenya, we've had good relationships with the US. Our mission here in Washington, in this country we have 3, Washington, New York for the UN, and the consulate in LA. We have invested, in terms of our diplomatic services, we've invested heavily in the US over many years. So our relationships with the US has grown from strength to strength. We have a lot of common interests, political, development, and Kenya continues to be a key recipient of US development funds. And this is something we want to strengthen and grow. And in fact, our trade and investment through AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunities Act, has grown the Kenya economy and contributed substantially to job creation. So we don't see anything to the contrary that would tell us we have a weak relationship or anything has been affected. No, we have very cordial relationships, and this is something that we seek to strengthen on a day-to-day, and we work very closely with our colleagues.
Even with statements like choices have consequences?
Well, at the end of the day, the Kenyans are the ones who decided who their leaders were going to be.
Right.
And that's the most important thing. We are a democracy. And no matter what opinion or statement one may issue around the choice of who we choose as to be our leaders, who determines leadership in Kenya is the Kenyan people. And that's the most important thing. And I'm sure even for the Americans, they would never take it kindly to be told who to vote for, because that's the whole value of a democracy. That's right. Absolutely.
You know as well as I do that the US is one nation that Kenyans have reaped well from in terms of education, that is. How is the government tapping on the skills to make sure that there is a seamless transfer of skills, especially skills that are relevant to Kenya? Rather, what is the embassy doing to encourage the Kenyans out here to be more engaged, especially in matters economic back home?
Economic growth in Kenya is largely driven by the private sector.
Yes.
And the government puts the enabling environment, puts the infrastructure. Now the private companies are very key in getting the diaspora to invest in different opportunities in Kenya. And we work very closely through the embassy with different private sector companies that present themselves with ideas and opportunities that they want to promote through the diaspora to community. And putting the diaspora community in touch with these opportunities is something that we do through different forums. The good thing about the Kenya diaspora community in America, it's very dynamic, very well organized and structured, and they pull together where there's a common interest. And all the common interests they all seem to have, very well articulated, is the need to invest in Kenya. And the challenge therefore even for the private sector is to come up with products that are sound, the due diligence is done, so that they feel that the investments are secure. So bringing these two groups together to make sound investments is really a role that the embassy plays and continues to play. And we're hoping, for example, that the annual events that are organized by diaspora community, organized by the embassy, and even the private sector now, we've seen a lot more private sector companies coming here and conducting roadshows in different states as a way of promoting their business. So, and we just work to encourage the diaspora community wherever they are to continue to do that. And just to mention, we're also very excited about something else that the diaspora community has done of strengthening wherever they live, whether it's in Atlanta, it's in Colorado, in Seattle, they have the sister cities, where they bring in their counties back home on a very strategic partnership with where their homes here in America. And that has really opened up a lot of counties for business opportunities and for partnerships with progressive towns and economies here in the US. So the diaspora is really stepping up to its role as a progressive citizenry and living up to their civic duty, and very, very proud of their effort that they're making.
Now let's shift gears a little. A US embassy official, one James Joshua Wald, I'm sure you are aware of this story, drives his car in the wrong direction in Nairobi and causes a fatal accident and injures many others. Then he is whisked away and boards the next flight out of Nairobi for Washington or wherever it is. Is this right? Would something like this happen if it was a Kenyan diplomat who did the same here in Washington or in New York or in Atlanta? Now, where is justice in this? Kenyans are asking these questions. That's why I repeat them to you as the ambassador in the US. Where are we on this matter, Balozi?
Very unfortunate incident again where a diplomat was involved in a hit and run in Nairobi. Yes. And already our Ministry of Foreign Affairs has stated that discussions are ongoing with our US counterparts in Nairobi. This incident, of course, happened in Nairobi. Yes. And all investigations and diplomatic discussions around it will happen in Nairobi. And you're right, we have actually received letters from Kenyans in America who are concerned about this particular incident, and they even want to support the family, which is, again, where Kenyans have gone over and above the duty of call and want to extend support. But we leave this matter in the hands of our ministry in Nairobi, which of course is handling the matter, and we just hope for a good outcome.
Obviously, you are clearly being as diplomatic as you can get when you say the ministry is doing this, that, or the other. But would it be too much, Balozi, to ask if Kenyans told you to bombard the State Department and seek answers, real answers?
Well, diplomats don't bombard. What we do is we address issues diplomatically, and I'm sure, depending on what Nairobi would advise, would take that step.
Okay, fair enough. Back to service delivery at the embassy. I revisit this issue because I know it's an issue that directly concerns the Kenyans out here in the US especially. How long, for instance, does it take to process a passport at the embassy? Just for the Kenyans to know.
The consular services at the embassy are structured more in line, by the Department of Immigration, which is really the custodian of registration of persons and issuing these important documents that facilitate movement of people. And at the embassy, we strive to, for a turnaround of 2 weeks for renewal. Visas is probably a week or less, depending on the season and the volume of demand. But our aim is always the shortest time possible to turn around. All documents being in place and all checks have been done and the verifications come back. There could be a few cases here or there where there's a delay. And as I mentioned earlier, our aim is to provide quality services. So renewal of passports is something we want all Kenyans to have. Always make sure as a Kenyan, even no matter what your status, that you have a valid document that identifies you as a Kenyan. Worst case scenario, if you had to travel home suddenly, we get a lot of Kenyans who just turn up in crisis. They need to go home the day after tomorrow. They want their documents in order, and yet they've taken time to bring them forward. Yes. So to avoid situations like that, we encourage everybody, please have your travel documents always in order. We are planning to start issuing national IDs, and that again will provide an added service to Kenyans. Hopefully in the new year, we'll be able to roll this service out, and also to provide young Kenyans who are born here or came here as children an opportunity to get a national ID card. This is something that's already been done in South Africa and in London, so we're extending the service here in America to the Kenyans. Actually the consular service in our embassy is one of the biggest departments because of the level of Kenyans who are here and visitors to Kenya. And just to encourage Kenyans, follow the process. Everything is online. You just have to remit your documents online, make your payment, and from there, if there's any complaint, we have we have an address through which you can send any of your comments and concerns on the website. But our aim is to turn around the delivery of your service as quickly as possible. But we need their support, and we want more Kenyans to please renew your documents. Yes. Do not be sitting here with expired passports. It's not a good spot to be in. And also the other issue is we want Kenyans also to register. Our website, kenyaembassy.com, yes, has a link for everyone to register. Why do we want you to register? Because it's the only way we can access services to you, if we know where you are and where you exist. And I know that there's been a concern, what is it we'll do with this data? And I want to assure everybody, It's not the Kenya government's business to share its data about its citizens with anybody else. This data is safe. It's for us to use so that if the opportunity comes for us to be able to identify where our citizens are, how to reach them for anything, we know where they are because they've registered with us. And as you're aware, in 2012, Kenyans here were very excited about the prospect of voting in the election. And during that time, we actually saw an upsurge in the number of people who renewed their documents, because that, according to our law, to register as a voter, you need a valid document, which can either be your ID or your passport. Unfortunately, that right was not actualized. But it's one of the progressive rights in the Constitution, which means the government is supposed to put in measures to show how this right will be realized. And already there's a strong indication that in 2017 we may again, this is something that we have to build momentum to make sure we're ready to actualize that right for Kenyans. So in preparation for that, we want to encourage Kenyans, please have your travel document, whether it's your ID, your passport, renewed and valid. And when we do come round to do IDs, we'll provide better information in the new year how that will be done.
How will the embassy roll out the ID issuance program?
One of the ways that the Kenyans in the diaspora will access this card, especially those who are children who are born here in America, or those who came here as young children but have now become 18 while they're in America. Now, for those who have entered America as children, they have a Kenyan passport, so they can use that as a form of identity to then get the national ID. Now, Kenyans who are born, children who are born to Kenyan parents would have to first apply, their parents would have to first apply for a birth certificate for them, a Kenyan birth certificate which recognizes that they are Kenyan but born in America. And then based on that, they can then acquire, demand the other's identification as a citizen. For example, so when they attain the age of 18, they can get an ID, plus they can also get a passport, a Kenyan passport, which is they're entitled to by virtue of their birth, because that's how they acquire citizenship. Okay. So the embassy is working very closely with the Department of Registration of Persons. Yes. To set up this service to commence in the new year. And once we're up and running, we'll be able to then inform Kenyans in the American diaspora where they can come and get their IDs. I think for those who will be applying the first time, those who have lost their IDs, how they can come and access the service. It would most probably, it will not be something that can be done online because of the nature of the way we issue IDs. Yeah. But as the service grows, we can see how to extend it further.
If you asked me, I would suggest road tours, for example, ones that will take the embassy staff to all the states, or at least to the cities which have high concentration of Kenyans, to reach as many Kenyans as possible and have them get their document.
That would be really ideal. Yes. It would be ideal because then we can reach more Kenyans, because America is a big country. Yes. And then Kenyans have spread themselves far and wide in this country. So the aim is, of course, to get as many Kenyans having valid ID cards and the other registration documents, so that they can access the services that they're entitled to.
Finally, Balozi, this is the first time that you're working for the Kenyan government, having served in the private sector and the civil society. Now the question is, how is this transition going? Is it easy for you? More so because I personally remember you as a firebrand activist, especially during those Moi days. How then is it that a person like you can work for a government that is, you having been on the other side of the fence, if you will?
Whether I was in civil society or in public service or even working as an independent consultant, I was always working on issues which were central to my country's development and interest. So it's being in different spaces that where you wear different, you're wearing the same, agenda is the same for the good of the country, whether you're advocating for women's rights, social justice, good governance, you just find that the agenda is the same, but you're occupying a different space in which to articulate the issues. But I think one of the greatest honor I've had is also just being able to work for the government. I think that gives a brilliant opportunity, and you're serving a much larger constituency and dealing in very, very dynamic issues. So it's it's a role that I've been privileged to be allowed to occupy, and I enjoy it very much.
We have been speaking to the acting Kenya's ambassador to the US, Jean Kamau, who has answered quite a number of questions from us, tackling pertinent issues, especially those issues that affect many Kenyans who live here in the United States. From Atlanta, this has been your host, BMJ Muriithi.